A wooden boat is a bit like a fine cathedral, built plank by hands that trust their own feel more than any gauge. 60 years ago, that's how every Viking left New Gretna, shaped from oak, fastened with bronze, and coaxed into being by a small crew who could read a curve by eye. The story of how those first boats came together and how Viking then leapt into fiberglass is stranger and more human than any factory tour today. We're showing you every development along the way. Our story begins on the banks of the Bass River, in a speck of a New Jersey town called New Gretna, a short run up the coast from Atlantic City. 60 years ago, two brothers bought a small struggling boat builder that made wooden 37-footers for offshore fishermen, and Viking Yachts was born. The factory was humble to the point of comedy, an old building on a patch of barren acres with a dirt floor and a crew you could count without taking off your shoes. There were no robots, no computers, no molds waiting to spit out a hull. There was timber, there were tools, and there were a handful of craftsmen who knew how to turn timber into a boat. What came out of that shed would go on to catch fish and eyes all up and down the coast. But before a single plank went on, the whole boat had to be laid out at life size, right there on the floor. Every wooden boat started as a drawing, but not the kind you'd frame on a wall. In a big open room called the loft, the boat's shape was drawn out at full size, life-sized curves chalked and battened across the floor until the lines flowed fair and true. This was the moment a designer's small sketch became a real, full-scale plan you could walk across. Get a curve wrong here, and every piece cut afterward would fight you for months. From those full-size lines, the crew made patterns, thin wooden templates for each frame and part of the hull. It was slow, painstaking geometry done with battens, weights, and a practiced eye, and it demanded a kind of patience most of us lost somewhere along the way. A boat, after all, has almost no straight lines in it. Getting all those sweeping curves to agree with one another was equal parts mathematics and art. With the shape locked in on the floor, it was time to raise a backbone strong enough to fight the Atlantic. Now the boat began to stand up. It started with the keel, the long backbone running bow to stern, and onto that spine, the crew fastened frame after frame of steam-bent oak, the curved ribs that give a hull its shape and strength. Oak was the wood of choice for a reason. It's dense, tough, and stubborn, the kind of timber that laughs at a hard sea. Workers would steam a length of oak until it turned bendable, then muscle it into a curve and clamp it fast before it could cool and fight back. Bronze fasteners held everything together, chosen because plain steel and salt water are sworn enemies. Piece by piece, a framework took shape on the shop floor, looking less like a boat and more like the ribcage of some great wooden whale. On a Viking, it was heavy, it was honest, and it was built to outlive the men who made it. A skeleton is only a promise, though. The real magic came when they began wrapping that bare frame in wood. With the frames standing, the crew began to plank the hull, laying long boards of wood along the ribs, one after another, from the keel up to the rail. On these early Viking boats, that planking was oak, and plenty of it, because in that era, nothing could match a thick oak hull for sheer strength. Each plank had to be shaped to fit a hull that curved in 3 directions at once, so a board that looked straight on the bench had to twist and bend its way onto the frames without a gap. This is carvel planking, boards laid edge to edge for a smooth outer skin, and it is unforgiving work. A single plank might be fitted, marked, pulled off, trimmed, and offered up again a dozen times before it sat right. Then it was fastened down with bronze screws, hundreds and hundreds of them, each one countersunk by hand. Where planks met, the seams were packed with corking cotton and sealed so the ocean stayed on the outside where it belongs. When the last plank went on, workers faired the whole hull by hand, sanding and planing those curves smooth enough to make your palm want to follow them. It was gorgeous, backbreaking, and slow. And it produced a boat that could take a beating no calm water sailor could imagine. A finished hull was a triumph, but a bare shell doesn't catch fish. Now, the boat needed a body built around it. Here's a detail that surprises people. Viking didn't build these boats in one fixed spot from start to finish. From the earliest days, the shop worked in stages, moving a hull through a series of build stations where different crews tackled different jobs, much the way the famous Carolina boat builders down south did it. One station framed and planked, another handled the deck and structure, another took on the cabin and joinery. A hull would reach a certain point, then move along to the next crew of specialists who owned the next chapter of the work. It was an assembly line, but a slow, wooden, deeply human one, where the machines were skilled hands and the conveyor belt was a boat inching toward the water over weeks and months. This mattered more than it sounds. Breaking the build into stations let a small crew tackle a big, complicated boat without any one person having to master every trade. A planking wizard could plank all day. A master joiner could focus on cabinetry. It was old-world craftsmanship organized with a shrewd, practical genius, and it planted the seeds for the real production line Viking would build once fiberglass entered the picture. The hull could float on its own, but a true sport fisherman lives or dies by everything the crew built on top of it. With the hull framed and planked, the boat grew a body. Carpenters laid the deck, raised the cabin sides, and built the trunk and flybridge where a captain would one day stand and hunt for fish. This was joinery of a high order. Doors, hatches, window frames, and cabin soles all cut, fitted, and fastened so tightly that spray couldn't sneak through. Remember, wood moves. It swells when it's wet and shrinks when it's dry, so every joint had to allow for that breathing without ever springing a leak. Down below, bunks, galleys, and lockers were built in by hand, each one shaped to the curve of the hull it lived against, because on a boat there's rarely a square corner to be found. Everything was bedded, screwed, and finished with a patience that borders on devotion. Then came the varnish and paint, coat after coat, sanded smooth between each one until the wood glowed like furniture and the topsides shone. A well-built Viking of that era wasn't a machine. It was a floating piece of cabinetry that happened to be tough enough to cross an inlet in an angry sea. Beautiful as she was, a boat needs a beating heart and a nervous system before she'll ever leave the dock. Now the boat got her guts. Big gasoline engines were lowered down into the hull and mated to the shafts and propellers that would push her through the sea. Fuel tanks, steering, plumbing, and wiring all went in by hand, threaded through a hull that fought you for every inch of access. Here's a fact that'll make a modern surveyor wince. Builders of that day, Viking included, often ran plain, solid, household-style copper wire through their boats, the sort of thing no boat builder would dream of using today. It worked, but it tells you how young the craft of production boat building was back then. Then came the hardware, the rails, cleats, chairs, and chrome that turned a wooden shell into a fishing machine. Every fitting was bedded against leaks and through-bolted to something solid. At last the boat was cleaned, polished, fueled, and eased into the Bass River for the first time, where a crew held their breath and watched for the one thing that could ruin everything: a leak. A tight boat meant a job well done. It meant a family or a charter captain would trust her far offshore. These wooden beauties were strong enough to cross oceans, so why on earth would Viking ever want to change a thing? For all its strength and beauty, that oak-planked hull carried a hidden curse: weight. Oak is magnificent, but it is heavy, and a heavy boat pays for it every day. It needs more horsepower to climb onto plane, burns more fuel to get there, and asks more of everything that pushes it. As Viking's own people would later put it with a laugh, you couldn't beat that oak planking for strength, but it weighed a ton. Wood carried other headaches too. It could rot if water found its way into the wrong place. It demanded constant upkeep, endless sanding and varnishing to hold back the sea. And every boat was a one-off labor of love, which made building a lot of them quickly a real challenge. If Viking wanted to grow, to build more boats, lighter and faster, without a small army of shipwrights for each hull, something would have to give. The answer was a strange, sticky, itchy new material that plenty of old-timers didn't trust one bit. Fiberglass promised lighter, faster, cheaper boats, but Vikings' first steps into it were, in their own words, completely backwards. When Viking first dipped a toe into fiberglass, they did it, in the family's own cheerful telling, backwards. They didn't trust the new material where it mattered most, the hull. So their earliest fiberglass experiment kept the heavy wooden bottom and used fiberglass only up top for the cabin and flybridge. Picture that, a boat wearing a modern fiberglass hat on old-fashioned wooden shoes. It sounds silly now, and the family would be the first to grin about it, but it made perfect sense at the time. Nobody had proven yet that a molded plastic shell could take the pounding a wooden hull shrugged off. Fiberglass was the new kid on the dock, and a boat builder's whole reputation rides on hulls that don't fail far from shore. So Viking tiptoed. They let the new material earn their trust in the low-risk places first, learning its quirks, how it cured, how it smelled, how it behaved, before betting a whole hull on it. That caution tells you everything about how seriously these folks took the ocean. Trust, once earned, changes everything. And soon Viking would pour an entire hull in one shot, would be damned. Then came the leap. Viking's first all-fiberglass boat, a 33-footer that changed the company forever. To build it, the whole process turned inside out. Instead of framing and planking a hull from 1,000 pieces of wood, workers built a perfect master shape called a plug, took a mold off of it, and then laid up the hull inside that mold. Layer by layer, crews rolled fiberglass cloth and sticky resin into the mold, building the hull's thickness one laminate at a time. Viking being Viking, they sanded between each layer, a belt and suspenders habit meant to make sure every laminate bonded tight and strong. Where a wooden hull was assembled, a fiberglass hull was, in a sense, painted into existence. And here was the magic. Once you had the mold, you could make another hull and another, each one identical to the last. The one-off era was ending. A boat that once took a small crew months to plank could now be pulled from a mold and repeated. Viking had cracked the door open on something enormous. One clever hull was a start, but the boat that turned Viking into a household name was one size up. If the 33 opened the door, the Viking 40 kicked it off the hinges. Before they trusted it to customers, the crew tested its shape in a way that's pure old-school ingenuity. They built the hull's plug out of wood, dropped 2 engines into it, and filled aluminum tanks with water to fake the weight of a finished boat. Then they ran that bare wooden platform, barely more than a steering wheel and throttles bolted to a hull, out into Great Bay to see how it behaved. It popped onto plane and rode beautifully, so they waited for a nasty day and ran it out through the inlet into a real sea. It handled like a dream. That hull became the 40, and the 40 became a phenomenon. It debuted at a big city boat show and turned into one of the best-selling sport fishermen of its time. More than 600 of the 40 and its slightly longer sister left New Gretna over the next 16 years. At the peak, Viking was rolling out a new boat every 5 days. Nearly every Viking built since has descended from that hull. 600 boats from a single mold, that number would have been science fiction to a shed full of shipwrights. Underneath all that talk of wood and fiberglass sits the thing that truly makes a Viking, the shape of the bottom. From early on, Viking committed to a deep V hull, a bottom that runs sharp and V-shaped rather than flat, so it knifes into a head sea instead of pounding across the top of it. On the 40, that V carried roughly 18 degrees of dead rise at the transom, a good bit sharper than many. Rivals dared. The trade-off is an honest one. A deeper V gives up a hair of flat-out speed and a touch of fuel economy, and in return, it hands you a boat that stays smooth, planted, and predictable when the ocean turns mean. For fishermen running long miles offshore to reach the canyons, that comfort isn't a luxury. It's the difference between a great day and a rough, rattled retreat. It's telling that once Viking found a bottom that worked, it kept the recipe. The materials and the models kept evolving, but that fundamental hull philosophy became the family bloodline. A great hull earns a reputation fast, and soon Viking's boats were making the giants of the industry nervous. With the 40s selling like crazy, Viking began stacking up new models, each one riding on the same proven mold-made approach. A 35 convertible joined the lineup and went on to one of the longest production runs in the company's history. A roomier double-cabin model arrived for cruising families, and larger convertibles followed close behind. Every new boat leaned on the same lesson: design a strong hull once, pull a mold, and repeat it beautifully. That's when the big names started paying attention. In those years, the sport fishing world belonged to established fiberglass builders like Bertram and Hatteras, the heavyweights everyone else measured themselves against. But buyers began to notice that these well-built, smartly styled boats from a little Jersey town fished hard, rode well, and cut no corners. Viking had crossed the line from scrappy underdog to serious contender. The scrappy little shed was a memory. In its place stood a real production boat builder, turning out fiberglass sport fishermen that could run with anyone on the water. But bigger volume raised a bigger question. What had all these molds truly changed about the way a boat gets built? That's the real revolution hiding inside this whole story. Molds changed what a boat company could be. In the wooden days, every hull demanded a battalion of shipwrights and months of skilled labor, and no two boats were ever truly identical. With fiberglass and molds, Viking could build a proven hull again and again, lighter than oak, tougher against rot, and far quicker to produce. The work didn't vanish. A modern Viking is packed with handwork, wiring, joinery, and finishing done by real people. But the backbreaking, one-off shaping of a hull from raw timber gave way to a repeatable process that a growing company could scale. That single shift is what let a small Jersey boat builder become a giant. Today, Viking builds its boats inside a plant sprawling across the better part of 1 million square feet, carving hull plugs with computer-guided cutters and infusing parts with resin in ways those first shipwrights couldn't have dreamed. More than 5,000 Vikings have splashed since that first wooden 37. From a Jersey shed to a sprawling modern plant. But somewhere in that leap, did something get left behind? Walk through Viking today and you'll find a different universe. Computer-guided machines carve shapes to a tolerance no hand could hold. Resin flows into molds under vacuum. And boats roll out faster, lighter, and more reliable than any oak-planked hull could ever be. That's real progress, and nobody's asking to go back to caulking cotton and endless varnish. But the wood taught this company something it never let go of. Those years of shaping hulls by hand, of trusting the eye over the gauge, of a crew organized into stations who each took private pride in their piece of the boat. That's the DNA underneath all the technology. A Viking remains a semi-custom boat, finished and fitted by people who care whose name goes on the transom. The materials changed. The shortcut-free obsession did not. Maybe that's the real lesson tucked inside 60 years of sawdust and fiberglass dust. The tools will keep changing, but a boat is only as good as the hands and the pride behind it. And that part, thankfully, no machine has figured out how to replace. If this trip back in time hooked you, you'll love 15 old boat styles you need to see. So the next time you watch a Viking climb onto plane and disappear toward the horizon, remember the dirt floor shed where it all began, and the shipwrights who built legends out of oak and stubbornness. Thanks for riding along with me. Keep the old boats floating, keep the stories alive, and I'll see you out on the water.